Hey family, thank you for tuning into Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa. Where only the strongest roots see the light, brought to you by Botanica Candles and More. And if you haven't had the opportunity, like this video, share it, and be sure to subscribe and let somebody know about our membership program, right? Today's episode is Orishas and nature. And what we're going to be talking about today is the different, at least the most popular Orishas and the spaces of nature that they frequent, right? So we're probably going to go over about 7 of them, at least to begin with. I'm sure there'll be a part 2 to this episode as well.
You should test me and see if I know.
Phil, you're a wild guy. You might get all of them right.
You think so?
Yeah, we've been hypothesizing that you're a 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁 on the low. You just haven't told us yet, But yeah, man, so the Orishas, just to get into a little background, they are nothing more than wavelengths, right? When we talk about the concept of 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗃, we're talking about energies that that basically are wavelengths of light, and they emanate from our supreme being or deity, which is Olorun or 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁, which is literally the sun, right? So when we look at the spectrum of light and the way it comes out, depending on the wavelength and the characteristics of it, is the Orisha that it's associated with, right? So why does Shango, is he usually characterized as a virile masculine man, corpulent man, the color red and all of these things? Because he's actually associated with infrared light, so it's very intense, it's very hot, and that's how it would physically manifest, at least to the Yoruba people all those years ago, or when he was actually born. Then you get into, energies like Oshun, the color yellow and that wavelength, it's a little more feminine, more nurturing, much more sensual. And this is how each of them kind of got their characteristics, but they're nothing more than wavelengths of light and energy expressed through nature and a prism, right? So to begin, the first Orisha that we usually always begin with is going to be Eshu or Eleggua. And what happened with Eleggua was that he was actually associated with a couple different places in nature, right? Ultimately, Eshu's positions are, I won't say somewhat man-made, but they definitely have a lot to do with society ultimately, because when we think of Eshu, we think about the garbage. We think about the crossroads or the four corners. And we also think about the jungle or the forest, right?
Wait, Joe, when you say garbage, though, that's not like a negative connotation there?
No, and it's really ironic, man, because Eshu is the wealthiest Orisha, and the first place he ever lived was actually in the garbage. And the reason being was because he said, I need to go to a place where I will never be hungry. And needless to say, he isn't, because there's nothing that's always as full as the garbage, He probably went to one in New York, But in the 𝗃𝗏𝗹𝗁𝗃 was actually where Eshu installed himself as the king of the garbage, right? Where there's various pieces of information where we actually feed Eshu animals while in the garbage or sitting in the garbage. The word garbage within Lukumi is usually known as 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃. I've heard the word 𝗃𝗏𝗃 as well. And what happened is in the 𝗃𝗏𝗹𝗁𝗃, things weren't going well for people. And they were trying to find a solution. They visited the 𝗃𝗏𝗹𝗁. And Orunmila identified the 𝗃𝗏𝗹𝗁𝗃 where Ifa said that they needed to perform sacrifice to the Lord of the garbage. Now, mind you, no one liked to go to the garbage. It's not a desirable place or being a dump. But when they arrived, Eshu was waiting for them. And he said, where's my rooster? And they said, well, Ifa told us to bring you one. So he ate the rooster in the garbage, in the dump. And he started sending prosperity to people because there was a huge famine going on. And being that there was a famine, they had no food to create garbage out of. Usually the people that are, I guess the most affluent have the most garbage or the best garbage. So that's actually one of the initial positions that Eshu is present in. And that's in the 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃, where till this day we still have a piece of work that we do where we feed the garbage in the 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏. I've actually done it many times, and it's been very fruitful. But that's one of the places, because Eshu never wanted to be without food because he's a glutton, right? Also in the 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏, it identifies why Eshu is in the is in the crossroads or the four corners. And I'm sure I've said this story before, but I'll reiterate it now for our first-time viewers. In heaven, all of the Orishas were identified to perform a bowl through the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍 when they arrived on earth to provide the first person they saw with a rooster. None of them did this. And because of that, all of them transitioned and ended up going back to heaven. And they really didn't have an explanation why, but one thing that was in common was that they were pursuing money over spirituality. And they actually consumed the rooster themselves, or whichever bird they came down with, but it's identified as a rooster. So Orunmila, when it was his turn to actually go down, he performed divination, and the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍 was revealed again, where he was given the same recommendation. So when he arrived on earth, as he came down, he started walking, he actually arrived at a crossroads, right? And he noticed the individual standing right in the middle, half red, half black. He thought it was peculiar. And when he actually got closer to the gentleman, he didn't even say hello. He just fed him the rooster immediately because he was trying to avoid an untimely fate like his siblings, right? And after the guy basically was force-fed the rooster, which he consumed, he looked at Orunmila and said, "Who are you?" Orunmila introduced himself and explained why he did what he did. And Eshu said, "I know exactly who you are and why you're here, because I'm the guy that killed all of your siblings. Because none of them fed me. My name is Eshu, right? And what I did is I provided the temptation to them to pursue money, which is nothing more than a worldly commodity, over spirituality, which they would have been able to get both if they just would have attended to me. So my friends are those who feed me. My enemies are those who make me starve. So me and you will be friends forever." And it's because of this story why the Babalawos are the ones who confection Eshu and are the only priests that should be providing Eshu. Because anything that has to be filled up or with a head concept, like a cement head or anything that takes a filling, is Babalawo territory based on this story. And from that day forward, all the other Orishas and their descendants came down, and they had to visit Orunmila to be able to make a pact with Eshu, which is ultimately the Hand of Ifa ceremony. So that's how Eshu actually became associated with the crossroads. So I don't know if Bone Thugs and Harmony was, if they had an offering to Eshu beforehand, but you never know. And there's one other position for Eshu that's very key and important, is when Eshu lived in the jungle or in the forest, Now, mind you, Eshu has been characterized as a hunter as well, a warrior deity, grouped in with Ogun and 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏, who we'll get into in a moment. But when we talk about the jungle, he was there very prevalently amongst many signs. But one of them is actually my own sign. In the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍 was where the person wanted to be able to alleviate their destiny and progress and prosper and whatnot. And divination was performed through their own 𝗿𝗲, where Ifa said that they needed to perform sacrifice to their Eshu icon, right? Which they did, but they had to do it with the rooster hanging upside down. And the reason being is because the blessing was suspended in heaven, and via allowing Eshu to try to get every drop of the rooster, Eshu actually pulled it down for them. Now, mind you, to fulfill the ceremony, they had to take the rooster to the jungle and offer it to Eshu to fulfill the pact, which they did, but Eshu implored them to also offer him a cigar. Maybe that's why I like cigars so much.
Yep.
And, 𝗿𝗏𝗃𝗃 would spend all day in the jungle smoking cigars with Eshu. So I tell you, I've lived that quite a bit. I've done that at Bo, and it's really provided me quite a lot. But that's one of the numerous signs and stories that speaks of why Eshu is in the jungle. You could reference Baba Ogun Nameji, when him, Ogun and 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 would hang out in the jungle. There's various signs. I mean, there's a path of Eshu that's pretty frequently in the jungle known as 𝗃𝗶𝗍. So you're going to see those three positions being very, very prevalent with Eshu. But the thing about Eshu is everywhere, because every Orisha has an Eshu, and Eshu, via his omnipresence and that characteristic that was gifted by him or to him by Olodumare, he's everywhere ultimately. But these are the three most prevalent.
And Eshu is Eleggua, right?
Same guy, different name, different manifestation. I actually got a question like that on the channel recently, where there was a viewer who said, what's the difference between Eshu Alaguana and Eleggua Alaguana? And really, the name of the energy that we're interacting with is Eshu. That's why when someone crowns Eleggua, which is nothing more than a title that says he who carries that which has been received, making reference to him actually delivering the offerings from humans to gods in heaven, it's just a nickname or a title. But when you crown Eleggua, your name is ultimately Eshu something. Like, for example, my son Danny's name he's crowned Eleggua, his name is 𝗍𝗏𝗍 or 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏, which means Eshu has created me. So, they're the same guy. It's just a different name and manifestation. Eshu's the energy, and Eleggua was the guy that was actually, born as a human to be able to become Orisha.
Interesting. And I think you told me a story before about Eleggua and Shango.
I'm sure they
Was he
interacted
building
quite a
a
bit.
house or something like that?
Yeah, when Shango was tempted by Eleggua, and he ran into this random woman in the jungle. That video actually got quite a few views.
Yeah,
I'm not sure why. Maybe it's the visuals. I don't know. But,
well, you're very descriptive. You know what we need to do? We need to find somebody to animate these pataquis for you.
We do, right? And so I can be the Morgan Freeman voice of Ifa. That's what I'll go down as. Not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, Eshu and Shango, they've interacted quite a bit, and we can delve into Shango now. That's a nice little segue. So, Shango is usually associated with the palm tree, right? Now, the ironic thing about some of these relationships is you'd think, if someone is associated with said area, it's because they love frequenting that area per se. It's not necessarily true. I mean, Eshu, I can't say he necessarily loved being in the garbage for anything other than the resources it would provide. So when we look at Shango and Shango being associated with the royal palm tree, or even in certain cases, the tree of Iking, it goes to the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍𝗶. And what happened is Shango was actually trying to court Oya, and he wanted to gift her a piece of jewelry, which some people say was a ring. Shango was a little nervous, to be frank with you, but he would never admit this. But Oya was a very imposing woman, and he was very attracted to her, but he didn't have the nerve to interact with her because he couldn't deal with rejection. So his best friend, 𝗃𝗏𝗄, which is a species of lizard. There's actually two types, the chameleon, and then there's another one that's more slender. That's the one that's more referred to in Orunmila in this story, because the chameleon has a story as well, known as 𝗃𝗏𝗃. And he asked his friend to be the liaison between him and Oya. And his friend said, yeah, brother, no problem. Even though Orunmila had told him not to with the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗍𝗶, but he didn't want to displease the king. So, being that, to be able to walk, he used all four of his limbs, he put the red ruby diamond in his mouth. And he was trying to get to Oya quickly, and unfortunately, he stumbled and swallowed it in a way where he couldn't get it out, and he couldn't speak. So rather than going to Shango and, informing him of his failure, which he couldn't stand to do, he went up the palm tree to hide. So Shango was doing his rounds, and he ran into Oya. And he said, oh, you didn't like my gift? She said, you've given me nothing. He said, I sent a ring as a courtship and, as a proposal. And she said, you haven't proposed to me, sir. And he said, the lizard never showed up and gave you what I sent. She's like, please don't waste my time. Shango, mortified in front of the whole marketplace, actually started scanning and looking for the lizard. And he looked in the one place where they would always congregate, which was the palm tree. And when he looked up, he saw the lizard. And the lizard did what most lizards do now when they court, it extended its throat, revealing this red organ, which really was the diamond. And Shango thought the lizard was taunting him, like, yo, I got, your diamond and, all these different things. When in reality, the lizard was trying to say, I swallowed this, but he couldn't speak it. So Shango, being very frustrated and annoyed, threw a lightning bolt at the tree trying to kill the lizard, which he was unsuccessful, but the lizard stayed hiding in the tree. That's why till this day, the lizard courts via its tongue and the extension of its throat. And then apart from that, that's why palm trees get struck with lightning more than any other tree. And that's why lizards and reptiles have a preference towards hiding in that tree. It provides the most security somehow.
Oh man, that's deep. I didn't even think about that.
A lot of stuff there. Yeah, that's Baba Ifa. And that's why Shango is in the palm tree. There's other Odus, like the Odu Okanasa speaks of when Chango went in the palm tree and cursed everybody because he was angry. And then there's another one in the Odu of Irete Ansa, or Irete Osa, where he actually had a business cutting palm trees to harvest palm wine. So that's why he's associated very heavily with that space in nature. I mean, obviously Shango is the king. He's associated with the palace. That's usually where you're going to find him. You know, the palm tree was kind of his digs. And when we look at all of these positions before we get into the next Orisha, the Odu 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗁𝗍 speaks of when the different Orishas found their places in nature. Orunmila went for divination in heaven, and the Odu 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗁𝗍 was revealed where Ifa told him while on earth to not run, especially in the rain. Well, guess what? When the Orishas came down from heaven, it started raining as a blessing from Olodumare, and all the Orishas started running because they didn't want to get wet or they were ignorant to what rain was at that point. So Shango went running to the palm tree. Eshu, or Eleggua, better said, went running into the woods. All the other Orishas, I don't want to spoil the other ones yet, they went running to their positions, but Orunmila walked. And based on him walking, he found a home. And when he presented himself at the door, he explained, hey, I'm looking for lodging. I'm a traveler. By chance, is there a bath here? Is there food here? The Yorubas were very hospitable people, before, the treachery of humanity as we've moved forward and the maliciousness of it all.
Yep.
Because you can't just let a random guy, up in your home. But, they let him in, and they realized he was a babalawo based on his beads and things like that, so they knew he was of moral character. And from that day forward, they asked him to stay. And that's why Orunmila's position is actually the home. It's the only Orisha that you find at home, per se. Like, as far as energy-wise, where he prefers to be. Some people will go as far to say, well, he's manifested through the tree of 𝗃𝗃, which is the one that provides us with the sacred seeds of divination, which is legitimate as well. But Orunmila doesn't like to be fed outside. He likes to be fed under a roof, in a home. The Odu 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗁𝗍 speaks of this as well. 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗍 speaks of this as well, where Orunmila liked to be under the shade. He didn't like to be under the sunlight directly or under the rain, etc., so he stayed in the home, and that's why he doesn't share his throne with anyone else, where, you'll look at certain Orisha functions, and they'll have cloth and a corner decorated for said Orishas where they might put multiple ones there. Orunmila doesn't share his throne. You might see an Eshu icon. You might be able to get away with putting Oshun there as well because they were married, but he was married to all of them at some point. So, it's better to avoid. But that's what Baba Ifa says about at least Orula and ultimately Shango.
Okay, Shango's a personal favorite.
Shango's the man. Shango's my guy. That's why I wear the color red as much as I can within context. And, he just, he's a regal guy, but, ironically, people would think, oh, he must have loved the palm tree. Well, some of his worst experiences were there, but some of his greatest triumphs were there as well. So that's why he just stuck with it. And it kind of reiterates his character. It's a phallic symbol. It's strong. It's robust. I tell you, a royal palm tree is a dangerous thing because you hit that thing at over a certain miles per hour, you might as well just be hitting a concrete wall. I'm not sure if you've ever been able to pat one, but the trunk, like the fibers, are pure cement. So it's very reminiscent of his character, right? So we did Eleggua, we did Shango, we've done Orunmila. Let's go ahead and delve into Obatala. Obatala is associated with the mountain, right? Why is Obatala associated with the mountain? Because they say that in the Odu 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗁𝗍, when he came down from heaven, apart from the version of the story where he landed and, spread the sand to create land matter, they say that the point where he actually touched down on lifted to be able to kind of coddle him and make his journey down safer, right? And the reason being, whether it was that or whether he just found a mountain that, resulted from tectonic plate movement, he wanted to be as close to Olodumare as possible, being that he was the personal messenger of Olodumare, and the intermediary in the first Orisha. He always wanted to be as close to the sun as possible without necessarily being exposed to it, because Obatala is not a fan of sunlight per se. They say that due to his character, the white cloth and the characteristic of his implements, he also was partial to like snow or a colder climate. Higher elevation is what he was used to based on his celestial travel from heaven to earth, ultimately creating it. He liked the snow-capped mountains and, you know, the mountains and elevation and the airiness of it all. But there is another version in my 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁 where in my sign was where Obatala progressively became more and more frustrated with humanity.
Oh.
And, you know, he actually was trying to get further and further away from them. And, you know, what he did was, he does what most people do in survival mode, is he took higher ground, right? So little by little, he started elevating and going higher and higher and higher to the point where people were like, all right, bro, you don't want to be around us? That's fine. You go do your own thing up there. But it got to the point where he actually kept walking, and he walked right off into the right off of the mountain and went into orbit.
Whoa.
So they say that that's one of the odus why, you know, Obatala is associated with the mountain, and ultimately, like, not necessarily just the atmosphere, but the cosmos. I mean, he had to descend through it to be able to arrive on Earth, and then he ultimately went back. Where the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁 says that, you know, we have to understand people have different personalities. We have to interact with them, understand them, and understand not everybody is the same. But Obatala there, you know, he retreated to the mountain when he felt overstimulated or he felt he needed a break, or sometimes he would just go right off the mountain into orbit.
Wow.
Yeah. And if you look at, you know, him representing the color white, you know, most people would look at the sun and, you know, it's a lot of white light. I mean, you look at stars, you look at, you know, the absence of light within, you know, all the darkness within the cosmos, but these little specks of white and whatnot, it really represents Obatala quite a bit, you know. So speaks of that. We've got through Obatala. Another one that's going to be a huge point of interest is definitely going to be Oshun. So I'm going to take a sip of water.
All right. Well, while you do that, I'm going to ask you a question while you take a sip of your water there.
Yes, sir.
So you know how horoscopes, they say, hey, you know, Pisces and Cancers are good to go together. Is there like that with like Ifa and the Orishas? Like, oh, you're a child of Shango. You should, you know, your partner, you know, if your partner is a child of Oshun, that'll work or not work. You know, do they have something like that?
Well, ironically, I had a random comment that I saw one time on one of these mediums outlets that discusses Ifa and Orisha, where someone actually refuted a statement I made that, you know, people can have characteristics of their guardian Orisha. Now, mind you, you're going to have things in common. I'm not sure what was so far-fetched about that, but are you going to be exactly like your Orisha? Absolutely not. You know, because I'm not exactly like my dad. My daughter's not exactly like me, but it's going to be far-fetched to say that she's not going to have any of my characteristics. I mean, we're dealing with, you know, generations of DNA, personality, all of these different things. So if we look at that concept and understand that we're not going to be totally like our Orishas or the Orishas, there is hope where, you know, maybe the common story of Ogun and Oya getting divorced is present, you know, in real life. That doesn't mean a child of Ogun and Oya can't have a very satisfying relationship that's going to be successful and loving and long-lasting. You know, and I've seen more classical combinations, like a son of Obatala and a daughter of Yemaya get divorced. And, you know, some people look to them as kind of like the root of, you know, the other Orishas. So it can have some influence, but it should never have an influence to the point where it can destroy, you know, or it can separate somebody. Because ultimately we have this thing called free will. We have Ori. We have all these things that we need to incorporate to be able to strive for a fortified relationship with the person we love and choose. So I'd say that.
Okay. Yeah, because I always wondered, you know, well, I don't know which one I am, but, you know, you hear about, oh, they're a child of Shango, so
yeah,
Chango
you know that Shango is really the one where it's like, oh yeah, Shango, it's not gonna work. The poor,
well, because he's been with everybody though. That's why
he's a bad boy. He was a very bad boy. I love him very much. He's a very bad boy. Well, if you look at our situation, I mean, I have crowned Oshun. My wife has crowned Oshun, and some people, I mean, they never told us, but you know, at least when we were together, but maybe before we'd heard conversations or knew the climate out there, like, oh, two Oshuns, you know, it's like two canaries pecking each other's eyes out. I assure you, it couldn't be farther from the truth. We maneuver very harmoniously, and very, very, very much in love with each other. You know what I'm saying, and care very much about each other. So you can't allow stereotypes to dictate your relationship or what it's going to be. When we talk about partners, I mean, we're talking about two animals, two human beings, two creatures coexisting on a daily basis. We just have to learn how to, be in frequency and maneuver and dance without stepping on each other's toes too much, but it shouldn't have a defining factor by any means. It's a conversation piece at best if it stays positive.
Okay. All right. Who we got next?
Oshun, man. Yeah. So Oshun. Why is Oshun associated with the river? Now, mind you, all of the female Orishas have a river associated with them in Nigeria, right? Oya has the Niger River. We have the Oshun River. Yemaya has a river. Yewa has a river. Oba has a river, etc. So the reason being is because the rivers are feminine in nature, right? We talk about a river. It's actually a metaphor for the womb. There's a path of Oshun known as Ibuyumu, which is the one that lives at the riverbed that causes her daughters to their wombs fill the same way a river floods, right? So it makes reference to the procreative aspects of it, the feminine aspects of it. Without the river is really the parent of civilization. You could look at, the Tigris and Euphrates, for Sumeria, or these rivers that are mentioned in Nigeria. I mean, without the river, the Nile, without this place in nature, we would not have been able to survive. So it's seen as a motherly, very feminine, very nurturing, a lot of provisions that it's given us. So that's why Oshun, amongst all of the female Orishas, is associated with the river. But why is Oshun most associated or most strongly associated? I think she is the Orisha that most integrated into the river and its concept, right? So when we look at the creation story of the land of Oshobo, where there's a famous story where there was a fish and the king made an offering. You look at Odus that even reference the Odu 𝗃𝗏𝗃 Alara makes reference of when Oshun embodied herself as the river, and the people from this land, or whichever land was referenced, would go and make offerings to the river to receive. It's become synonymous with her, especially with her character that has to do with childbirth and the sweet waters, etc. The Odu Odiche speaks of when the river met with the ocean, the river being Oshun, the ocean being represented in that manifestation by Yemaya. So once again, making reference to her. There's so many Odus of Oshun that really speak about the river. But, when we look at the Odu of Obeyono, I think it's probably the best example, because the relationship between Oshun and the river actually came from pain. Oshun was homeless, right? And she had a set of white clothes that she would wash in the river every day. And due to the orange terracotta hue that some of the rivers have in Nigeria, her clothes became stained over time, taking on a copper complexion, right? So it was just it was reminiscent of her poverty. So she would cry, and she was very depressed. People would shame her because she didn't have the money to be able to initiate into Orisha. This story is in Obeyono as well as Ogun-𝗏𝗏𝗍, depending on how people want to interpret it. I might throw it for both, to be honest with you. But what happened is one day she went to visit Orunmila. Divination was performed. Obeyono was revealed, where Ifa said that she needed to perform sacrifice with her last dollars to be able to give an offering to Eshu, and her life was going to change. And when she did that, Eshu instructed her to show up in the village at 11:55 a.m. And wait there, till something happened, and pick up whatever she saw. So Eshu showed up at 11:50, and he disguised himself as somebody, as a messenger, and he started screaming that a monster was coming and he was gonna pillage and rob everybody, and they needed to leave all of their belongings of value at their front door and close the door and, stay in for at least 10 minutes, which they did. And Oshun showed up 5 minutes later and started picking up everybody's money, And she completely just ran through everything. And then 5 minutes later after that, or 10, what have you, Everybody came out and they're like, oh my God, we survived. Oshun went back to visit Orunmila. She said, what do I do with all this money? He said, well, first thing you need to do is you need to initiate into Orisha, which was the big reason she was doing it, to become queen. And she did. She came back wearing white clothes, and people were like, oh, how'd you get the money? And she said, well, Orunmila did 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗍, right? And she always paid homage to Orula, Eshu, and she also went back and gave offerings to the river that helped her maintain hygiene and hope up until that point. Some people even say she married Orula afterwards, so he came out winning for sure. But that's why Oshun is the female Orisha that's most strongly associated with the river.
So when I always thought that was Yemaya. Is that the ocean? Or?
So what happens is Yemaya is a river deity as well, right? But the big issue we have nowadays is like the discrediting. So people are like, no, the Lukumi Ifa has misunderstood this concept. Yemaya has nothing to do with the ocean, and she is a strictly river deity, right? Now, this within our scripture differs a little bit because Yemaya has a special relationship with Olorun, who is the owner of the ocean, that the other female Orishas do not. Olorun chose to procreate with Yemaya and also collaborate with her, and he gave her a specific place within the ocean to be his representative, right? So in the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 was where they shamed Olorun, and he went to the bottom of the ocean, and he chose Yemaya 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁 as his wife to represent him on earth because he didn't want to go back to the surface to deal with people. It was kind of like the Atlantis concept. Mm-hmm. There's other Odus like 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗲 that says that Olorun had all the wealth, but he didn't know how to distribute it. So he left Yemaya as the surface of the ocean to distribute his wealth and reinvest for him and make them prosperous. And the Odu of 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲 or 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲 was where the 7 shades of blue first manifested. And, they were all Yemaya's sons that she had with Olorun. That's in 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲. So that's why to be able to get the full prism of blue, within water, you have to go into the ocean because the last one, you can't get it from a river. It's just not deep enough. So that's why Yemaya and the Odu of 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲, through procreating with Olorun and having 7 sons, was able to create the prism of light, which goes back to our original concept that that's nothing more than what the Orishas are. Thus making her, an ocean deity from surface level only. So the film on top of the ocean, that top layer, that's Yemaya. Everything below it is Olorun. And some people would say that even there's a path of Yemaya known as 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲, which is represented through the bubbles that come up through the constant in and out of the waves. I mean, some people would even go as far to say 𝗃𝗍𝗄. Some people would say that's also Orisha. So, but Yemaya is definitely there much more than all the other feminine deities. So that's why she's associated with the ocean. There's also another story, which isn't very flattering. In the Odu of 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗍 or 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗍 was where Yemaya was married to Olodumare. But Olodumare was a very busy man, and he was an older guy. He wasn't necessarily interested in being intimate with his wife as frequently as she might have wanted to.
What?
So Yemaya, rather than just being satisfied with being queen of the universe, said, hey, I need a little more. So she went and started an affair with Olorun, who was Olodumare's son. Yeah. And Olorun wasn't really happy because he's like, they took, what was it, 30% of my territory away and only left me with 70% of water mass. So they were carrying on their affair. But Olodumare had a very faithful servant named 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏, who was a fish, right? Some people would say it was the catfish. Some people would say it was the red snapper. And he went running back to Olodumare to say, hey, your wife's cheating on you. And he said, prove it. He said, well, she has a mark here and she looks like this and she makes said noise. And he's like, oh my God, this man has seen my wife in the nude. So he called her forward to, ask her what she had done that day. And I think she said she was washing some clothes. And he called the fish forward and he said, tell her what you know. And he said, I saw you do this, that, and the third. And I know because you have this on this part of your body. You have a birthmark here, And just like that, the jig was up. And Olodumare said, I'm not going to kill you, but you can go live with him rather than be with me. And he blessed the fish. and became his faithful servant. You know what I'm saying? And there's very specific processes that happen with that 𝗏𝗲 with the fish that we won't get into here, but that's where Yemaya married Olorun, because she got caught by the fish, who was actually, if you look at the name Yemaya or 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 means mother whose children are the fish. The fish snitched on her because he felt bad. He's like, because he was Olodumari's son as opposed to Olorun's per se. And he was like, this isn't right. So everybody's just got to kind of fall into place.
That's interesting. I
tell you, man, you look at some of this material, and that's why you got to love it. Not because of the salaciousness of it all, but it's just very honest, And unfortunately, a scenario like that is played out somewhere. So, the Yorubas were very honest about life and understood human behavior, and we really haven't changed much. We're animals, and that's okay, because we should always maintain an aspect of ourselves that is beastly. But, always, focusing on the modern and the refined, but we cannot ignore, we are creatures, just like any other.
So weird question here. So with the 𝗏𝗲s were they all written at the same time, or were they all written over time?
Brother, that's an amazing question. And that's one of the most hotly debated things right now is because, you have the 𝗏𝗲s were from the beginning of time. Let's start there. The signs, they are the basis of creation. Just like the binary code in the Matrix is, this is the real manifestation of that concept. Where we might see, I don't know, a bottle of rum, celestial sight, you'll see the sign 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, or whatever sign is associated with alcohol. Now, mind you, it won't be like Neo where I'm seeing the 1s and 2s or 1s and 0s. Yeah. But, when we do a divination or whatnot, that sign will come out and be like, oh, wow, look at that. Just look at that whiskey bottle right there. It manifested, So the signs were always there. It was the first 16 known as the 𝗏𝗍, which are the twins, because the right side looks like the left side. And then they procreated amongst themselves, creating the other 240 for the grand total of 256, where everything within existence is compiled within it. And then from there come the stories, right? So Ifa says this is like our 7th existence. We've been obliterated a couple times. But what happened is our ancestors.
Wait.
Yeah.
You said go back.
Yeah, Ifa says this is like our 7th try.
So literally, the Matrix literally just ripped that off.
I think so. I don't want no problems. But there had to be a 𝗏𝗏𝗏 there, or somebody who understood African indigenous spirituality. Because I remember the first time I saw the Matrix, because I've never been a sci-fi guy. It's me and technology really don't work.
That is true.
I don't know. I have an aversion to it, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm such a reader, or my grandmother. I don't know, old school Cuban lady. She wasn't a fan of technology neither. Something with a remote was always getting thrown at the TV, but I've just had an aversion to it. But when I said, it's on, everybody talks about it. I watched that movie I think for the first time like 10 years ago, and I remember just sitting there and looking at it. I said, oh my God, this is us. I'm Neo. Orula's Morpheus. Ifa's the Oracle. Eshu is the guy in the black suit, or the guy at the end. Who's the guy with the white beard that sat down with the Oracle? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, the creator or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's Eshu, bro. He's Eshu, or maybe that's the male aspect of creation, and Eshu was Mr. Smith. You could go so many different ways with it, and then you look at Trinity. Being Neo's counterpart, it could be Oshun, or Neo could be Shango. It could just, it was so many archetypes. I'm like, oh my God. And to be frank with you, because, Black Panther was such a beautiful movie, but it was very easy to see, who's based on who, the guy with the crocodile markings, that's Ogun, and then, you have the guy from the gorilla tribe, and, obviously Chadwick was Chango, the king to be, all these different things, but it was to the face, and it was gorgeous. But you look at something like The Matrix, it was so subtle, but if you know what you're looking at, you're like, dude, who was on here? So I don't know, maybe Lawrence Fishburne is 𝗏𝗏𝗏. I don't know, but that was like pure Ifa, complete Ifa.
Well, I know we're deviating, but
it's apparently, a good deviation.
Apparently, the 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗃 brothers, or that are now sisters, they apparently stole the script from a black woman. So
Oh my God, I did not know that.
I'll give you more info on that. Also, same with Terminator. I think she wrote that too, but they took it.
What a talented woman. Good God.
Yeah. But anyway, you said 7 times.
Yeah. So this is like our 7th existence, and ideally, we're gonna get it right this time. You know what I'm saying? So,
but that's been proven by science too, because I've heard there's been 6 extinction level events that have happened on Earth.
Bro, let me tell you something, and this is wild, right? In the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁𝗃𝗃, it speaks of when Obatala came down. This is in Ayoba as well, but 𝗃𝗃𝗃 speaks of it even more firmly. When Obatala came down from heaven and he released the hen onto earth, she started going like this, right? She started spreading all the earth, and it was magically enchanted, and it created landmass. And they did a study where they actually showed Pangea, like the original one where all the continents were together and everything, and the outline is a hen. So like when I saw that, I immediately I was like, oh wow, because that was the first. It wasn't the first animal to step on land. The first animal to step on land was the chameleon. But right afterwards, once the chameleon was able to show through his cautiousness, that's why he still walks like that to this day, that land was firm enough for the hen. They say a 5, I don't think you'd call them toad. I don't know what they're called, as far as digits wise on an animal like that. But it had 5 digits, and it started going like that. And then, when they actually did that, that outline of all of the land matter, how it originally looked, it was an outline of a hen.
Wow. So,
the Yoruba people, the Africa had knowledge. I mean, you even look at, I guess my ancestors, the Dogon, right? I mean, like, look at all the stars and the Sirius complex and system, and them knowing about it, and them being like, how'd you know about this? Like, oh, the people from the sky told us. I mean, these are things that are irrefutable. Whether you want to accept them or not, I mean, that's completely up to you. But there's no other reason why those people should know that star is there without any modern technology. And if their explanation is somebody from the sky came down and told them that, I think we need to believe it. And I tell you, we're living in a time where I don't know if we necessarily care or have time to even digest, because, like, you look at the aliens in Mexico and all these different things. I'll be frank with you, I didn't give it a second thought. I mean, I didn't have time. I had to go to work.
Just like, yep.
Yeah, it's like, God bless, man. Hopefully they help us out and don't obliterate us, because they might be tired of us too, That's why they don't want to interact with us, And to be frank with you, the Orishas as well, it's not that they'll abandon us. But you have to understand, when you have an Orisha icon, the Orisha does not live there. What lives there is a medium or a counterpoint that you call the energy of Orisha there, and it's a facilitator for them to be able to receive that offering. So your Eshu does not live there per se. Like, he has a bunch of things to do. The energy fluctuates, what have you. You have to call Eshu back. How do you call Eshu back? On your weekly process, you're spitting the rum, you're spitting the water, you're smoking a cigar, maybe any of these different things. You're just doing that to call that energy back. And then at that point, you can receive through giving, So I don't think they'll ever turn their back on us, but, it might become harder to call them back and get those results, just based on people's behavior. And that's on an individual basis. But the Orishas are everywhere and nowhere all at once. They're not confined. And I think that kind of brings us back into our theme, is that, these energies are far too immense and far too complex to be held within the confines of our, mundane interpretation and psyche. They're far beyond.
So before we continue real quick.
Yes, sir.
Sophia Stewart is the woman's name. She wrote a screenplay called The Third Eye.
God bless her. That's Odi. That's I mean, come
on. Which she claims in a lawsuit that James Cameron and the Wachowski brothers took ideas from her screenplay for The Terminator and The Matrix.
I mean, I'm I don't get involved, but all I'm saying is that I'm not shocked, because those are concepts that the way they were expressed in that film. And, I'm embarrassed to say I didn't see the Terminator at an age or in a way where I can fully recall it, other than, Arnold with his famous line. But there are concepts in The Matrix that I don't know how someone who has not interacted with Afro-Indigenous philosophy would be able to, equate. Now, I don't know if Mr. Cameron has or the Wachowski family has, but if not, that's very, very, concerning, because where did you come up with this? Because even though there's very logical people and philosophical people, I mean, some people would go as far to say I'm an enlightened individual. I couldn't have come up with all this. Like, I mean, there's people who have invented religions, but the thing about Ifa is when you actually practice Ifa, like someone such as myself who has performed hundreds of Ifa divinations, whether it be with the chain or with the seeds, the way that thing lines up when it's revealed is it's chilling, because the things that it's spoken about, like, for example, when my grandmother passed away, I didn't read myself at least for a month or two into the new year. And when I read myself that day, I actually put some red roses to my Ogun altar, because those were the flowers she liked. And then when I pulled the sign that night, the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁 was revealed for me that year, and that's where the God, what is that? It's a songbird. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but he gifted the princess the red roses. So I mean, it's just very chilling, because it's like, dude, like how does that happen? But it's nothing more than a spiritual science that captures nature within your psyche, for a period of time. It's a photograph. And this was the technology that we had. So people look at it as trivial, some seeds, a board, I don't know, a chain. They're like, well, that's as trivial as it gets. Well, maybe things as trivial as that built the pyramids. I don't know, because we haven't been able to recreate that, even with all of the modern techniques that we have now. So what have we been disregarding, and what have we been, delving into? And it's for us to analyze.
Wow. Yeah, I just wanted that little deviation, because we talk about the Matrix all the time. So I was like, well, look at that.
Yeah, no, that's a Bible movie right there. Regardless of who had the pleasure of actually releasing it. I mean, it's just, there's things there. You could learn Ifa just by watching that movie.
Wow.
So yeah. So we went over Eleggua. We have Orula. We did Shango, Obatala.
Oshun,
Yemaya,
Yemaya.
Oshun. I guess
Let's go with
over
Ogun.
Ogun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ogun. Ogun, man. Ogun's the man, by the way. Love him very much, man. Ogun is the finest representation of masculinity within Ifa besides Orunmila. He's stoic, he's quiet, he's strong, he provides, he protects. He was everything, to ancient culture. I mean, he was a barber, he was a blacksmith, he was a butcher. He fulfilled all of the roles necessary to really catapult humanity into what would become modern, right? The modern phase. But Ogun has always been associated with the jungle, always been associated with the vegetation. I mean, there's a song that says, Asho ewe hogunde shiviri 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲, where we say Asho ewe, where Ogun came with the cloth made of leaves, which is making reference to the mariwo, which is the skirt of palm fronds that he wears. And in some parts of Africa, he actually puts it on his head. But the reason he's so associated with that part of nature is because when the Orishas carved their path from, it actually doesn't even refer to the ground. It refers to heaven and the cosmos. That's why, the Orishas may be aliens or extraterrestrials. I mean, it's really not that far-fetched, especially when you look at the regalia that we wear, or that's expressed through, Yoruba royalty, but that's another deviation. When Ogun was seen as, with his machete, being able to carve a path between heaven and earth, the first place they landed was within the jungle, right? All this vegetation. So you have all these Orishas here, and they have all these things they have to accomplish or want to do, and they have no way of getting out of this one little oasis of pasture to be able to expand. And that's when Ogun arrived, and with his machete, in the Odu of Baba Ogun Nameji, which means Ogun created with the machete, he was able to cut it down and really open up the path towards progress, not only for celestial beings, but their descendants, the human beings. And that's really the basic story why Ogun is associated with that space in nature. Now, mind you, Ogun was also a huge fan of the jungle and the solitude, because he was a guy that would get very overstimulated. He had a lot of high moral fiber. You know, he believed things were right and wrong, and, you know, being justice and the iron. We really don't have time for interpretation. What's right is right and what isn't. But there is a story in the Odu of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 or 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗁, where Ogun abandoned humanity because he was very overstimulated by the city. He really couldn't stand it. He wasn't a people guy. He didn't have a lot of customer service. He just wanted to work. And one day he realized people didn't appreciate him, or, you know, it was a lot of immorality, and he trekked off into the jungle where all the other Orishas tried to bring him back because society came to a halt. And all of them were failing because he was threatening them with death, which is the famous story when Oshun covered herself in honey and went into the jungle and was able to lure him back out with her sensuality, where he realized that, you know, he had to spend the majority of his time in the jungle, but there were still times when he had to interact, you know. There's also a story in the Odu of 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, where Obatala lived in the jungle and Ogun lived in the city, and they hated it because Obatala was a people person, Ogun was not. And one day they realized, you know, walking on the border of each, that they wanted each other's lives, and they made the trade, and Obatala went to the city and Ogun went into the jungle. So, you know, it's been very, very, you know, common to see Ogun constantly in the space of nature and foliage, and he really needed that to be able to relax, because it's like metal. You could overstimulate metal, the electricity, you know, it was too much for him. So, you know, him, just like 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 as well, in the Odu of Ogun 𝗀𝗏𝗍𝗔 was where they both went into the jungle together to become hunters, and Ogun 𝗀𝗏𝗍 was where they lived together in the jungle for hunting. There's very few stories where you don't see them there, per se.
That's deep.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, another Orisha that a lot of people are interested in is 𝗃𝗏𝗹.
Yeah.
𝗃𝗏𝗹 is she's the warrior queen, right? She's the buffalo. She is Shango's right hand in battle, his concubine, his woman. 𝗃𝗏, the word 𝗃𝗏, literally they only changed one letter to be able to distinguish the two in conversation. You have 𝗃𝗏, which is the Orisha, and you have 𝗃𝗏, which is the marketplace, and they are synonymous. Most people really like to correlate 𝗃𝗏 with the cemetery. 𝗃𝗏 actually is not present inside the cemetery, because 𝗃𝗏 represents air, and in the cemetery there is no oxygen per se, as far as for people, you know, the people that have passed on to penetrate into.
Not breathing.
Exactly. And if you ever go into a cemetery, it's almost still. 𝗃𝗏 doesn't like to be in there. She actually only represents the gate, they say. So if she's not associated with the cemetery, where is she associated with? And that is the marketplace. The word 𝗃𝗏 means market. And ironically, even though the physical remains go to a cemetery, which is a New World concept, because in Yoruba land, they bury you in your backyard where your ancestors can attend to you, the spiritual cemetery, or bastion of spirituality, is the marketplace. Because the Odu Baba Ifa says this is nothing more than a marketplace. We're trying to make our way back home. So 𝗃𝗏 is associated with the marketplace and Egun because of those concepts. Now, mind you, in Yoruba land, you'll have a palace, right? Like the Alafin, or the Afin of Oyo, which is the palace of Oyo. Alafin means owner of the palace, or owner of the law, depending on, you know, letters and minutia. The palace is surrounded by a marketplace, right? The same way Chango always wanted to be surrounded by 𝗃𝗏. So she's associated with the marketplace, and erratic spirits, or spirits in general, are there, and they're kind of who keep things, you know, moving and flowing. It's seen as a very spiritual place. And for all of the people who've had the privilege of, sighting or seeing, if you were in Cuba, you definitely saw, you know, yaos, or recent initiates, going to the Plaza de Cuatro Caminos, which is a very famous marketplace in El Cerro. Or, you know, you might just be randomly out here and see a person in all white making offerings to the marketplace. It's really reiterating how spiritual it is and how crucial 𝗃𝗏 is, and how necessary, because the marketplace is known as 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗍, which is a title for a metaphysical marketplace, if not a real one, that's seen as the border between heaven and earth. And it's almost like a portal, right? It's one of those places that's kind of open, where you kind of, interacting at will. So 𝗀𝗏 is associated with that. She is a river deity. She has her own river, probably the most important one. She's manifested through lightning, right? She's very quick, the wind. But when we're talking about nature, even more so than the so-called cemetery, 𝗀𝗏 is the marketplace.
Wow, man, this has been probably one of my favorite episodes, honestly. If you're new to this channel, this is a must. I mean, all the episodes are must watch, but
yeah,
this is definitely a must watch. A lot of information in here if you were wondering about the Orishas.
Yeah, all of my credits to wifey. 𝗃𝗏𝗶𝗶. A lot of people have been hitting her up, asking her, why this, why that. And she was like, honey, you should make a video on this concept. And one that really simple for me, because when you know Orisha, you know where they are, you know how to find them. I mean, it's just interesting because when you look at the origin stories of the Orishas, and that's why every Orisha has the capability of being crowned, because for an Orisha to be present within the pantheon or to have a real world manifestation within nature, you have to be able to get initiated into it. So if you look at a concept like Olorun, there's no way that if Olorun was present on Earth, and I can't express the fine detail there that really shows why, but if there is an Orisha on Earth, it's because it was able to be initiated into and reincarnated as. So if you look at the other Orishas that have their own places in nature, the reason they have their own places in nature is because there's spiritualities that come forth from there to be able to be initiated into by us, the human beings who utilize these spaces in nature. So for example, let's say in ancient Yoruba land, you wanted to go interact with the palm tree. The Shango guys were going to be like, well, if you want to get close to our sacred space, I mean, you gotta hop in with us. You got to get hazed out.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with the ocean. Or you want to come and give to offerings to the sacred part of the ocean. Yeah, you have to initiate into Olorun. You can call it crowning. You can call it initiating. It's all the same thing. So if any, it lets you know that this is how these things are still here. It's not just because the palm tree is still growing in said corner. It's because we're still paying homage to it through the initiatory rites that were taught to us by our ancestors and God.
I mean, we could probably do a part 2 with the
with
Orishas,
the other ones.
like a 𝘄cie,
will.
all those too. So if you didn't hear yours on this
We got you.
episode, don't fret, we got you. But I think it's time.
My man.
And we get some shoutouts. So if you are new to the channel, we have a completely awesome separate membership program.
Yes.
For those wanting more Our Roots podcast and Joseph Baba Ifa. You can quickly join by clicking the join button below, and you get 3 different options of 3 different tiers, which each offer separate perks if you join.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's give a shout out to
Shoutouts.
Robert Cifuentes. He's an OG, so we gotta give him. I think he's a day oneer.
Yeah, he's been around. Yeah.
We got Obatala.
Blessings, 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏.
We got 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗃𝗏.
Thank you.
We got Trinarican Goddess.
My goddaughter. God bless. Good episode.
We got another OG, Richard Massey.
Oh, Rich. Blessings, man. Thank you.
Yep. Let's. I don't know why it does that, but
we got to take a break. It's too stimulating, man. You got to give the elevator music a break.
Right.
It's
I
nice.
have it on loop too, so I don't know why I stopped.
Oh, it's
anyway,
good stuff.
we got 𝘃𝗏𝗃𝗏 Fury.
𝘃𝗏𝗃𝗏, thank you.
Katrina Allen.
Thank you, Katrina.
Joaquin Mendez.
Joaquin, blessings, me how.
And another shout out to 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏84.
𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏. Guys, lots of new information coming out in the membership program. If you know anybody that could benefit from it, let them know about it. If you haven't gotten in there, please do. We're coming out with a bunch of content, exclusive content on paths, our ideas, things that we think are going to benefit you, whether it's motivation or very specific ways to do things. The audio podcast is out and pumping. If you want to be able to listen to it without the visuals, it's there for your enjoyment. botanicacandlesandmore.com is up and running for all spiritual services and products. We have some new shirts that came out recently as well.
Oh.
I'll be rocking them soon. Yeah, some new Oshun joints that are really nice.
Okay.
And, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and always, until next time, see the light.